Welcome to a sleepy journey. But not a boring one. Tonight, we'll turn the pages of the tumultuous history of the Ashkenazi Jews, from their earliest exiles to the deeply ingrained memories of resistance flowing through their veins. You crouch low beside an uneven limestone wall, lit only by the flickering light of a narrow window slit. You've been told this drawer hasn't opened in over a century, and judging by the creaking wood and stubborn dust, that sounds about right. You tug again. Something gives. The drawer slides out halfway, then catches with a sudden thunk. You pause. The air inside smells like dried ink, forgotten spice, and centuries of unanswered prayers. You brace yourself. Tilt the drawer forward, and out spills a waterfall of paper. No, not paper. Parchment, scrolls, folded notes, wax-stained contracts, half-torn amulets, onion-skin-thin receipts written in spidery Hebrew script. Some of it crumbles as it hits the floor. Some of it seems to sigh, "This is the Geniza." And you, sleep-deprived and poorly paid, are the latest soul to disturb it, so, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here on Ashkenazi Historian, and hey, where are you listening from? Drop your location and local time in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in Fustat, Egypt. It's the year 1184, give or take a festival or two. The Jewish quarter wakes slowly, like a cat in sunlight, with the clink of copper pans, the creak of old doors, and the unmistakable scrape of a broom against the synagogue steps. The city smells like olive oil, hot linen, and the Nile trying its best not to flood. You step inside the Ben Ezra synagogue, not as a noble visitor or learned rabbi, but as the lowliest of scribes. Still, today is not about your job. Not really. Today, it's about this drawer. You were told to clean up a little, which in Geniza terms means sifting through a millennium's worth of forgotten lives. Now, let's pause here for a second. You might be thinking, how hard can it be to organize a bunch of old scraps? Well, first off, you probably wouldn't survive the heat. Or the humidity. Or the occasional beetle that somehow made its home inside a marriage contract. Also, try reading 13th century Hebrew cursive written by someone with arthritis and a grudge. Fun, isn't it? This drawer alone holds roughly 200 fragments. Each one could be anything: a thank you note from a spice merchant, a draft of Maimonides' Guide for the Perplexed, or a very awkward love letter written in 3 languages by someone who clearly shouldn't write poetry. You lean closer and find your first treasure, a small crumpled piece folded 8 times over. You smooth it out gently. It's a shopping list. Chickpeas, soap, pickled lemons, a pinch of hyssop. Nothing divine. And yet, there, at the top, someone has accidentally written the tetragrammaton, the 4-letter name of God, which means, of course, you can't throw it away. You can't even burn it. That's why it ended up here. In this sacred junk drawer of Jewish civilization, and that's how most of it starts. The Geniza isn't really a room, not officially. It's a shaft behind the women's gallery, a place where sacred texts that can no longer be used are respectfully retired. But someone long ago decided that texts included just about anything. So here you are, ankle-deep in a literary compost heap of one of the most literate communities of the medieval world. Historians still debate whether this was intentional archival genius. Or just the byproduct of generations too guilty to throw anything out, but what they left behind, oh. It's exquisite. And hilarious. And human. A letter from a merchant in Sicily arguing with his cousin over a debt, and calling him, in writing, a moldy fig in a borrowed robe. A schoolboy's failed attempt at a Torah verse where he accidentally names a biblical patriarch Abraham avocado. A woman's petition to the community asking them to make her husband bathe more than once per season, lest the smell chase off even the fleas. You pick up a page and squint. It's from a legal dispute over a carpet dowry. The phrase "half the goats of her father's roof" is underlined. Twice. This is not just a junk heap. This is a nervous system. A collective archive of what it meant to be Jewish, middle class, busy, tired, in love, in debt, and chronically overcommit in 12th century Cairo. You brush off a thin bundle wrapped in linen. The parchment is fragile, but the ink is still legible, a draft of a ketubah, a Jewish marriage contract, never finalized. In the margin, someone wrote delayed due to illness, chicken pox. In faded red ink, you smile. Then frown. Then place it gently aside. Nearby, another note, a list of synagogue repairs. Repair the roof before Passover, or risk frogs again. You wonder briefly if that's literal. Probably. Frogs love old roofs. As the drawer empties, a rhythm takes hold. Fold, brush, read, sigh. Ink smudges your fingers. Dust tickles your throat. You feel the tug of time in your lower spine, but you also feel something else, connection. You are not alone in this sacred mess. These people had your same fears, your same bad handwriting, your same habit of correcting a draft and then writing forget it, rewrite in the corner, and in their smallness, in their footnotes and coffee stains and prayers scribbled in margins, they became eternal. You lean back, close your eyes. The candle sputters. Outside, the muezzin calls. And somewhere far above this drawer, pigeons coo gently beneath the rooftop sun. You've only just begun. You hear the city waking before you feel it. First comes the sound of hoofbeats on uneven stone, too fast to be a delivery cart, too slow to be a panicked messenger. Probably just the spice merchant's apprentice, late again. Then, the faint splash of a pail being lowered into a courtyard well. The woman next door is already shouting about the price of onions. And somewhere behind you, in the kitchen of the synagogue, someone drops a ladle with enough force to curse in 3 languages. You stretch, arching your spine until you hear a respectable crack, and shuffle your way through the back of the Ben Ezra synagogue toward the courtyard. Fustat is fully awake now. The sun, sharp and low, cuts between crooked rooftops. A rooster walks by with more confidence than any man you've ever met. This is the city of ink. Of paper. Of spices and letters, prayers and tax forms, theology and lunch menus, all written in the same slow, curling script. Welcome to your kingdom. Or, well, your rented desk in the corner of it. The Ben Ezra synagogue isn't the biggest building in the quarter, but it's the busiest. It's like an ancient social media feed, if everyone shared the same 4 scrolls and argued in person about every post. You pass 2 men already mid-debate over whether a borrowed goat counts as a neighbor's property or just an extended household utensil. They nod at you. You nod back, adjusting your ink flask before it spills again. You're not famous here. You're not even respected, if we're being honest. But people know your name. Or at least they know to ask for the one with the smudge on his forehead who copies fast. Your name isn't in the history books. But your handwriting will be. Let's rewind the scroll a bit. It's still morning, and you're setting up your workspace in the scriptorium. Well, calling it a scriptorium might be a stretch. It's more like a glorified storage closet with a window that sort of opens. The room smells of old vellum, fig jam, and that damp plaster smell that never quite goes away. You light a second candle, Cairo's sun or not. The corners stay stubbornly dim. Before you today, 4 sheets of parchment, a bottle of lampblack ink mixed with vinegar and a dash of pomegranate rind. For color, 3 pens, 1 cracked, 1 chewed, 1 working, and half a sesame roll that somehow acquired ash on the bottom. A good day, all things considered. Your first task. Copy a response from the head rabbi to a merchant in Alexandria. The rabbi has dictated something deeply complicated involving land inheritance and the biblical laws of Jubilee. You, meanwhile, are more concerned with fitting his oversized, looping handwriting onto a single page without rewriting half the thing. That's when you hear it, the distinct chirping cough of the synagogue caretaker's parrot. A relic from some trade ship, it lives in the women's gallery and curses in Persian whenever someone interrupts morning prayer. You sigh. You haven't had your tea yet. Fustat isn't like Europe. Jews here live openly. Loudly. They run businesses, schools, pharmacies, even their own courts. You're still taxed unfairly, sure, but so is everyone else. You can read Arabic, write Hebrew, and curse in Judeo-Arabic. You live in 5 cultures at once, stacked like books no one has time to sort, but make no mistake, this is a Jewish city. Or at least a city with a Jewish heart that beats in paper. No one throws out a name of God here. They write it, kiss it, then store it. And the place they store it? The Geniza. Even your shopping lists, if they accidentally get too holy, end up tucked behind a Torah scroll. Somewhere in this city is a laundry receipt that now sleeps beside a letter from the Jain of Pumbedita. You find this oddly comforting. Historians still argue whether the Geniza was designed as a sacred archive or just became one out of guilt and mold. Either way, it makes your job surprisingly important. Every letter you write could outlive you. Not because it's profound. Because it's written in ink and no one wants to deal with erasing the name, and yes, you always accidentally write the name. It happens, late morning now. The courtyard outside buzzes with business. A boy runs by shouting about fish. A woman is selling second-hand prayer shawls with more charisma than truth. You scribble steadily. The ink bottle burps once, a good sign, then, a knock. Not on your door, technically. On the wall, you sigh and slide open the wooden slat. A small hand pushes through a folded piece of parchment. You take it, it's unsigned. That means scandal. You unfold it, carefully. It's not from a rabbi. It's not a legal form. It's a request. Short. 3 lines. Someone wants you to copy a poem. Not just any poem, that poem. The one about longing that allegedly makes even the head of the yeshiva blush. You raise an eyebrow. No name. No coin either, you copy it anyway. You're a professional. By noon, the synagogue smells of heat and body oil and burnt sesame. You wipe your brow with a sleeve already crusted in dried ink. There's a line forming outside the side room. One man needs a will translated from Judeo-Arabic into Aramaic, another needs a bill of divorce copied cleanly before sundown. And someone, bless his overly pious heart, needs a mezuzah copied, certified, and rolled before he can move into his new house. You think longingly of nap time. Remember nap time, no matter. You roll your shoulders, sharpen your pen, and whisper the blessing you always say under your breath before you write anything holy. It's half prayer, half habit. Something like, may this ink be dark. May this pen not break, and may I spell Jerusalem correctly this time. You take the next sheet. A draft of a betrothal agreement. It's sweet, awkward, stilted, full of promise. You copy it slowly, letting the shapes of the letters smooth your breath, letting your thoughts wander just a little. You wonder if anyone will ever read this copy. If it will end up in a drawer. If, centuries from now, someone in a very different world might unfold it and try to guess your name, the sun rises higher, and with it, the dust. It filters in through the latticework above your desk, little gold spears that catch the edges of your papers and flicker across your knuckles. You pause for a moment, turning your wrist to watch the dust sparkle. You've seen this play of light 1,000 times, and somehow, it never gets old. There's something sacred about it. Or maybe you're just stalling because the next document is a royal tax demand and your eyes are already beginning to cross. This one's a headache. It's a long, winding letter from the Diwan, the Fatimid bureaucracy, to a Jewish merchant who may or may not owe more taxes than an entire alleyway of cheesemongers. You're meant to copy the letter in Hebrew script for the community records. And possibly for the man's own defense. If things go south, your job isn't to argue. Just to copy. But you can't help muttering as you write. 2 dinars for crossing a bridge that isn't even built yet. The ink spread slightly on this parchment. Too humid today. You adjust the nib of your reed pen with the tip of a fingernail. There's no room for smudges in a document this serious. Outside, the parrot is arguing again, this time with the cantor's daughter. In Persian. She seems to be winning, you continue writing. You've learned to half listen and half ignore the sounds of the world outside your scriptorium. It's like being in a bubble of prayer and sarcasm, you pause only when the rabbi himself walks past, he doesn't say much. He just nods once, his beard glinting with an impossible patch of gold from the window. You nod back, but you feel your posture shift immediately. You straighten your back. Adjust your ink. Pretend you weren't just doodling a tiny fish in the margins of a tax letter, it's not just letters you copy. Sometimes, it's halakhic responsa, questions sent in from Jewish communities as far away as Sicily or Yemen. They arrive rolled tight, tied in palm thread, bearing the creases of long journeys and probably the scent of goat. Each one is a mystery, a confession, a puzzle. You never know if the question will be about trade ethics or whether someone can use chicken broth as ritual purification for a particularly stubborn stain. Today's is tame, a woman from Aleppo asking if she can remarry after years without word from her traveling husband. The rabbi's answer is precise, elegant, heartbreakingly neutral. You copy it word for word, each letter carrying more emotional weight than the page can bear. Historians still debate whether these responsa reflect the rabbi's real opinion or just the safest legal cover. But you've seen the pauses. The scratched-out words. You know the ink trembles differently when it's personal, there's power in these pages. Quiet, papery power. Your hand cramps, it always does, right around this hour, that slanting middle morning time when the sun is too high to feel poetic but not yet high enough for lunch. You flex your fingers, shake your wrist, and unwrap the second half of your sesame roll. It tastes mostly like sesame, partly like ink. You consider it an occupational hazard, and knock, this time, it's the bakery boy, he's delivering a flatbread that you didn't order but will absolutely eat. He winks and says it's from Miriam. Ah, Miriam. She's technically a copyist, too, though no one calls her that. She works 3 stalls down, mostly with religious poetry. Her handwriting is better than yours. You won't admit it aloud. She once corrected a misquoted verse in the margin of your work and you've never quite recovered. She also makes a fig jam that could bring a grown man to repentance. You nod at the boy. Tell her I said thank you, and that I found the misplaced diacritic. He grins. He will not pass on the message. Now it's back to work, this time, a letter to a spice trader in Tyre. It's not your letter, obviously. It belongs to the merchant 2 floors up, the one who always smells faintly of cinnamon and never remembers your name. He dictates from memory, pausing only to complain about his cousin's accounting. You write what he says. You do not correct the grammar. You do not comment when he misquotes a proverb. You simply write, until he says something that makes your pen stop mid-stroke. Tell him the shipment of nutmeg is cursed. Twice now the jars have shattered. I think someone wrote a charm on the inside of the lid. You glance up. He's not joking. You raise an eyebrow, but say nothing. You've heard stranger things. Once, a woman brought you a ketubah to copy that had a clause involving dreams and a rooster's agreement. Another time, a man swore his wife's dowry included a haunted cheesecloth. Still, nutmeg curses are new. You copy the words carefully, and then, just to amuse yourself, add a protective phrase at the bottom in tiny script. May this paper be less fragile than its contents. You doubt the man will ever notice. He barely reads Hebrew. Around you, life continues. Children scream at pigeons in the courtyard. Someone drops a bundle of wool and curses creatively. The cantor's son is practicing again, the same melody, over and over, slightly flatter each time. You pause to rub your temples. Somewhere behind you, the Geniza yawns open, not literally, of course, but it feels like it. A long creak from the attic above, followed by the patter of someone tiptoeing in. Likely another boy from the yeshiva, sneaking up to read something they shouldn't. It happens. You did it, too, once. The first time you held a centuries-old manuscript in your hands, ink faded. Corners crumbling, your breath caught. Not because of the words. But because you recognized the handwriting. It was your grandfather's, just a shopping list. With a blessing tacked on the end. Folded, saved, forgotten, and now sacred. You shook for a full minute. That's when it hit you. Permanence isn't about marble statues or fancy titles. It's about the accident of survival. And sometimes, a scribble in the margin becomes history. The sun edges past noon, the air thickens. You fan yourself with a scrap of parchment and wonder if you remembered to drink water today. You reach for the next sheet. It's blank. And for a moment, just a moment, you don't want to fill it. You want to leave it empty, untouched, perfect in its possibility. A clean page in a city of layers. No law, no poem, no curse. Just silence. Then you remember the parrot is still squawking, and your stomach is now officially growling, and Miriam will absolutely make fun of you if she sees you staring at paper like it owes you something. You dip your pen, and you write. You step outside the scriptorium just long enough to blink at the sun, now glaring down in full, golden defiance. Cairo in the midday heat feels less like a city and more like a slowly baking loaf of date bread. Sweet. Dense. Suffocating. The streets pulse with chatter and carts, an endless parade of cloth merchants, spice sellers, and barefoot boys wielding water jugs like precious relics. You're not headed far, just across the courtyard to the little booth that passes for a café. Café is generous. It's more a shaded nook run by a man named Dowd, who serves exactly three things: lukewarm tea, bread with whatever jam he could coax from his cousin this week, and advice no one asked for. Today, he offers all three at once. You look like your quill tried to strangle you, he says, slapping a cracked mug of mint tea in front of you. Too much tax law again. You nod, biting into your bread. Fig, again. Probably Miriam's. Dowd chuckles. You Geniza scribes, always copying curses and love letters. No wonder your neck's hurt. You shrug. Better curses than grocery lists. But truthfully, you kind of love the grocery lists, especially the ones that drift into commentary, where a husband starts writing lentils, garlic, 2 onions and suddenly adds, and if Rivka buys more saffron we'll have no shoes for the baby. Those moments feel more alive than anything signed by a vizier. Historians still debate whether the Geniza was ever meant to hold so much non-religious material. Some argue the rules about divine names got loosely interpreted over the centuries. Others say the community knew exactly what it was doing, preserving their real lives alongside their ritual ones. You suspect it was both. A bit of reverence, a bit of laziness, and a lot of human mess. Back at your desk, you have a rare moment of quiet. The heat has driven everyone into shaded rooms or cooled stone halls. Even the parrot seems to have lost its voice. Thank the Holy One. You take the moment to organize your folders, not that they're actually folders, more like stitched packets of parchment, each tied with thread and labeled in your own careful Hebrew scrawl. You file them under categories that make sense to you, even if no one else would follow: legal, probably useless; poetry, suspiciously sappy; correspondence, spicy addition; medical advice that will kill someone. That last category is growing. Just last week, you copied a remedy that involved dried frog skins and reading Psalm 121 backwards. For toothache. You wrote it down, of course. You're not a censor. But you may have added a note in tiny script: ask Miriam before trying this. And of course, there are marriage contracts, so many ketubot, each carefully drafted, some radiant with gold ink, others plainly scratched in the cheapest script money could buy. You remember one in particular, a marriage promise in Alexandria that was never fulfilled because the groom ran off to Damascus the night before the wedding, taking the dowry and the bride's shoes. You copied it all, including the footnote: found his sandals by the river. No body. You still wonder what happened to him. Or if the bride ever got her shoes back. Then there are the letters that never reached their destination, piles of them, most written in Judeo-Arabic, the peculiar, comforting blend of Arabic grammar and Hebrew script. You've become fluent in the way people stammer through letters, polite at first, then rambling, then suddenly accusatory: dearest cousin, I hope your shop prospers. Why haven't you answered my last 6 letters? Are you dead? Or just married again without telling us? You keep a few of those in your correspondence, spicy edition folder. You wonder if they were dropped on purpose. Or if they just missed their caravan. Lost between Cairo and Cordoba, one man's unfinished plea to a lover in Fez. One woman's complaint to her brother-in-law in Aden. All waiting to be found centuries later by a scholar with too much funding and not enough social plans. You think about that sometimes. Who might read your own scribbles? Will someone, 1,000 years from now, read your work and wonder what kind of man added tiny fishes to the margins of court summonses? A shout from below. You lean over the edge of your window to see two boys wrestling over a scroll, old, brittle, and clearly too delicate for their games. You shout down, "Oi! That's a teshuvah, not a skipping rope." They freeze. Then one of them bolts. The other just holds the scroll out like it's on fire. You groan, descend the steps, and retrieve it yourself. The parchment is dusty, frayed, and smells faintly of lentils. But the ink? Still legible. Back upstairs, you inspect it properly. It's a responsum from 2 generations ago, signed by a rabbi with terrible handwriting and worse spelling. But you recognize it. It's a ruling about whether a man can bequeath his business to his daughter if his son is known to be, how did he put it, a gambler and a goat chaser. You remember copying that one when you were younger, half laughing, half horrified. Now, it feels like an old friend. You smooth the parchment. Recopy it. File it under legal. Surprisingly progressive. You pause for tea again. This time you make it yourself. Dowd's is charming but tastes like boiled mint socks. You drop in a sliver of cinnamon bark, your own stash, a little secret indulgence. The scent reminds you of your grandfather's study, where you first learned to read. He used to fall asleep with books on his chest, ink still wet on his fingers. You used to watch the letters move across his skin as he breathed. That's how you first understood writing wasn't just information, it was breath. The breath of a community. A family. A city made of paper and people. You sip your tea, and just before the muezzin calls the afternoon prayer, you dip your pen again. And start writing something different, not a tax form. Not a marriage contract, just a note, to yourself. A prayer, maybe. Or just a list of things you don't want to forget, the light on the ink at dawn, the parrot's ridiculous vocabulary, Miriam's margin notes, Dowd's terrible tea, that boy's scroll, that name you once found, folded in linen, signed with a tear. You fold it, slide it under the corner of your desk, and smile, because even if no one else ever finds it, the Geniza will. By mid-afternoon, the Geniza room breathes with silence, and dust. You push the heavy wooden door open, and immediately the air changes. Cooler. Thicker. More sacred somehow, though it stinks faintly of age and mildew. This is no archive in the modern sense, no glass cases or climate control. It's just a dark, windowless attic chamber above the Ben Ezra synagogue, where centuries of discarded Hebrew documents have come to rest. They call it the Geniza, from the Hebrew root ganas, to hide, to store away. Not to trash. Not to forget. Sacred writing deserves better than the dump, even if it's just a business note with a divine name scribbled in the corner, and you, lucky you, are among the scribes allowed to sort its contents. You close the door gently behind you, as though not to disturb the ghosts, because it feels like they're watching, honestly. 1,000 voices, each folded neatly into parchment, whispering their unfinished stories. The room is lined with wooden shelves. But they gave up organizing years ago. Now it's more of a soft paper mountain, a drift of crinkled memory that spills in all directions. There are no labels, no categories. Just the rule, if it mentions God, or once belonged to someone holy, it comes here. And sometimes. Well, people stretch that definition. You've seen it all. Contracts, letters, charms, sermons. A shopping list where someone asked God to bless the onions. An IOU on a fig-stained napkin. Even a bill for a stolen donkey, addressed to the man who knows what he did. Historians still debate whether this chaos was accidental or brilliant. Some say the Geniza began as a solemn storage of prayer fragments, later overwhelmed by communal clutter. Others argue it was always meant to be a time capsule of real Jewish life. Intentional. Raw, you crouch down and pull out a bundle of papers tied with blue string. The top sheet is brittle and crumbles at the edges like a well-used pastry crust. You recognize the handwriting, Rav Nissim, long dead, but fond of run-on sentences and too much ink. This one is a sermon. Possibly from Purim. You read aloud softly, so the dust might hear. Even Haman, cursed be his name, could not have anticipated the price of saffron in Fustat. A joke. A real one. You smile, alone in the quiet. Further in, you find something stranger, a folded packet of cloth, unusually delicate. You untie the faded ribbon. And inside, a love letter. Well, several, not just love. Longing. Raw, breathless, sometimes desperate scribbles. Hebrew, Aramaic, and Judeo-Arabic all mixed together. The first one reads, "To my moon-faced Tamar, forgive my cowardice. I have not yet spoken to your father, but my soul is already stitched to yours like the seam in my coat." You blink, then read another, "I dreamed again that you held my hand at the edge of the Nile. If this be sin, may the angels forget it." You check for names. Just initials, Yod and Tav. These letters are anonymous, hidden in linen, kept private even as they were laid to rest here. It's not the first time you found passion hidden among prescriptions. Once, you unfolded what looked like a medical chart and discovered a sonnet tucked into the margin. Another time, it was a legal deposition. On the back, someone had drawn a horse with a woman's name written underneath it. You still wonder whether the horse was a compliment, but this feels more sacred than law or debt. You place the packet gently into a new folder labeled to revisit later. A category that's grown dangerously large. There's a noise behind you. You startle, heart leaping like a scribe caught dozing. But it's just the floor groaning. Or maybe the Geniza itself, sighing under the weight of centuries. You sit cross-legged now, feet asleep, ink stains on your elbows. This is your favorite part of the day. The quiet rummaging through paper soles. Every folded page is a door. Every door leads to someone you'll never meet, but whose breath still lingers in faded ink. One document catches your eye. Heavier paper. Richer ink, it's a ketubah, but in Ladino. A marriage contract from Spain, dated before 1492, you whistle low, a relic from before the expulsion. You skim it reverently. The bride's name is Sol. The groom, David ben Yaakov. Their witnesses are a who's who of a vanished community. The dowry is impressive: pearls, 2 embroidered robes, and what looks like a vineyard, but scrawled on the back, in a different hand, is a note, burned in Granada. May their memory be a blessing. You hold it gently, not for preservation. For mourning, because somewhere between Spain and Cairo, someone carried this parchment like a wound. Folded it. Saved it. Gave it to the Geniza not as trash, but as tombstone. The Geniza doesn't judge, it takes saints and sinners, sermons and songs, market lists and heartbreaks alike. It remembers everyone equally, like a city of shadows pressed between parchment. You think, suddenly, about your own notes, the scribbled prayers you've tucked in the corners of ledgers. The snide comments about merchants who underpay. The tiny sketches of cats in the margins of legal briefs. What? The cats are relevant. Sometimes, you wonder, will those make it in? Will some future reader chuckle at your sarcasm? Wonder about your love life. Marvel at your obsession with cinnamon. Maybe that's the point. You leave the Geniza room with your arms full and your heart a little heavier. Outside, the light is low and amber. Evening calls float across the rooftops. The scent of coriander and wood smoke drifts through the alleys. As you walk back to your scriptorium, you glance at the paper bundle under your arm, the love letters, the burned ketubah, the sermon about saffron. A strange assortment. A living archive. You pass Dowd again, who raises a teacup at you like a benediction. Find anything juicy? You just smile, there's always something. And as you settle once more at your desk, ink bottle uncorked, lamp lit low, you write not from obligation, but from joy, because copying the past, preserving it, and occasionally doodling cats on the side, it's not just a job, it's how memory survives. You blink a few times, rubbing your sore wrists. The ink from the Geniza still lingers faintly on your fingers, the smell of old paper riding with you like a shadow. But your break is over, now it's back to copying. You sit once again at your low wooden desk, worn smooth from years of elbows and candle drips. The oil lamp flickers quietly beside you. Outside the small window, Cairo's light is going soft and golden. The city exhales, cooling from its long heat. And you're about to begin copying a letter that doesn't belong to you. It's from a merchant in Cairo, addressed to his cousin here in Fustat. But the cousin is long dead. The original parchment was nearly eaten through by time. Your task is to preserve its contents, not because it's world-shaking, but because someone, somewhere, once thought it was important enough to send. That's the sacred work, ordinary things saved for extraordinary reasons. You dip your pen into ink made of gallnuts and iron filings, smells like vinegar mixed with regret. And slowly, carefully, you begin to copy the words, to my esteemed cousin Daniel. May his household prosper and may his bread never burn. You can tell from the first line this merchant was a drama queen. The script loops with flair, unnecessarily long tails on letters that really didn't need them. You roll your eyes, but also admire it. This was a man who understood the performance of writing. You try to stay true to his style, adding a little extra swoop to your letters. Call it homage. About halfway through the letter, your stomach growls. It mentions a shipment of pepper, and now all you can think about is stew. Not just any stew, but the thick lamb dish you smelled earlier on the walk past the tanner's district, heavy on coriander, just a hint of garlic. You push the image away, focus. The letter describes a delay at the port in Alexandria, too much rain, not enough bribes. Then something odd, a line about someone's missing boots. Historians still debate whether these kinds of tangents in merchant letters were meant as jokes or veiled criticisms. Maybe the boots were literal. Maybe they were code. Maybe they were a polite way to say, your brother is an idiot, and I blame you. You dutifully copy the boots, then sign the letter at the bottom, not with your name, but with the scribe's traditional sign-off, Katavti velo chatati, I have written, not sinned. A little defensive, perhaps, but after hours of staring at someone else's half-legible scrawl. It's fair. You stretch. Again, there's a crack from your back that makes the young apprentice across the room wince. Yosef, barely 15 and already complaining about ink fumes, shakes his head at you like you're ancient. You throw a walnut at him. It misses. Copy faster or I'll make you recopy this entire letter, you warn him. He groans in that exaggerated teenaged way that transcends time and geography. You smile. You remember being that age, learning to cut parchment from goatskin, ruining your first 10 pens, trying to forge the rabbi's signature just to impress a girl. It worked. Sort of. Now you're the one correcting other people's Hebrew. The next task, a Talmudic excerpt requested by the local healer. Apparently, he wants a new clean copy of Tractate Barakot, especially the bits on dreams, blessings, and whether one may drink wine before morning prayers. You suspect he's less interested in theological clarity than in using the margins for recipes again. Last time he returned a copy, it had onion poultice for cough written sideways between two blessings. And a note about fig paste for constipation next to the story of Rabbi Yochanan bathing in the Jordan. This time, you decide to leave him some space, literally. Wider margins. Just in case he needs to jot down the medicinal benefits of boiled duck feet, you begin, from when does one recite the Shema in the evening? The line never fails to calm you. Something about the rhythm. The predictability. You could probably write it in your sleep. Sometimes you almost do. The candle flickers. You dip your pen. Your mind wanders slightly as you copy, and soon you're remembering your own childhood, pressed close to your grandfather's side as he mumbled the Shema in a cracked voice before bed. He smelled of smoke and talcum and warm bread, the smell of memory. Just as your mind begins to fog pleasantly, Yosef pipes up, why do we copy things nobody reads anymore? You pause mid-stroke, it's a fair question. And one with at least 3 answers, the community reads them, you say first, Yosef shrugs. The scholars do. He shrugs again, less sure, finally, you look at him, because memory is a form of resistance. That gets him, he blinks, you explain, softly. Not like a teacher, but like a friend, there are people, kings, sultans, inquisitors, even well-meaning reformers, who want to decide which stories matter. Who gets remembered? Who gets forgotten? But if we copy everything, even the boring parts, even the footnotes, we make it harder to erase us. He nods. Slowly, you think about what you just said. Then add, also, we get free ink and don't have to work in the tannery. He laughs, because really, sometimes the best reason is, it beats scraping cow hides all day. Evening deepens. From outside, you hear the call to prayer, echoing over rooftops in a voice that barely sounds human, high, mournful, eternal. Like a lullaby and a warning all at once, the synagogue windows have turned golden, the day is nearly done, you close the Talmud carefully, set it aside for binding later. One last task, you pull out a crumpled page you've been meaning to recopy for weeks. It's not religious. Not legal. Just a list of debts, from a man named Moshe, dated 3 years ago, owed to Rivka the midwife. The goat seller. A boy named Eliyahu who lent him a sling, and at the bottom, scrawled in a different hand, Moshe died. But the sling was returned. You copy it anyway, because even slings matter, even goats and midwives and unreturned favors deserve their place in the scroll of history, and as you set your pen down, roll your shoulders, and blow gently across the drying ink, you feel it again, that quiet pride, you're not writing history's headlines, you're writing its heartbeat, the ink is still damp on Moshe's returned sling when your next scroll arrives, delivered not by a synagogue attendant, but by a panting boy with wild hair. And one sandal, he holds the parchment out like it's a venomous snake. From the Karaite quarter, he says, as if that explains the panic. You thank him with a fig and a nod, and he bolts. Ah, the Karaites, now there's a wrinkle in the parchment, you turn the scroll over slowly. No seal. No sender's mark. But you recognize the writing immediately, sharp, tidy letters with no flourishes. Karaite script, no question. They pride themselves on austerity, both in theology and penmanship. Karaites, for the uninitiated, are Jews who reject the Talmud. No oral law, no rabbinic interpretation, just the Torah and a lot of side-eye at the rest of you. They've always been the awkward cousins at the family reunion, same last name, wildly different dinner conversations, but here's the real twist, they still hire you to copy their stuff, which is how you, a thoroughly rabbinic scribe with an opinion or 10, find yourself smoothing out a scroll written by someone who would rather eat dry lentils than study a page of Talmud. The text is curious, it's not legal. It's not poetic. It's a sort of inventory crossed with a letter, a list of who owes whom, with some thinly veiled sarcasm, to Yehoshua the elder, may his lamp be brighter than his tongue, you can't help but chuckle. Passive aggression, the glue of intercommunal relations, the list details will purchases, a broken loom spindle, several unreturned prayer shawls, who borrows a talith, and a mysterious donkey situation no one has annotated further. Historians still debate whether these scribal inventories served as formal communal memory or just low-grade gossip committed to ink. Either way, they're priceless. You begin to copy, but not before setting your coffee down, carefully, to the left. The last time you spilled anything on a Karaite scroll, the apology letter took 4 hours and a full bottle of ink. The room is quiet again, Yosef has gone home. The sun outside your window is now a smear of peach and violet. The Geniza door creaks in the back as the heat of the day finally lets go. And you copy, carefully. Quietly, a donkey debt. A prayer shawl complaint. Someone demanding repayment in barley instead of coin. It's absurd and mundane and deeply human. It reminds you that no matter how much theology Karaites and Rabbanites argue about, everyone still gets annoyed when Abraham borrows your cart and forgets to bring it back. And you write that down, too. Not as commentary, just a quiet footnote, in the margin. A small asterisk for a large truth: all theology eventually meets the marketplace. You pause for a moment to rest your eyes, not from exhaustion, but because you're squinting at something scribbled in between the lines. It's faint. Practically invisible unless the light hits it just so. You adjust the lamp. It's a marginal note written in the tiniest cursive script. Likely from a different scribe. Yehoshua lied. The loom spindle was whole. Ask Miriam. You laugh. There it is again, ancient pettiness baked into sacred paper. You don't copy that part, of course. But you mark it with a subtle dot. For the future. For yourself, because someday, some scribe like you will read this again, and smile. And no, you think about the invisible layers in every scroll, every dot, margin, blot. Every small stain of pomegranate juice or sweat. Each tells a story. Remember the page you found last month with a mustard fingerprint? You were halfway through copying a court record when you realized someone had eaten lunch over it. You imagined the scene, legal arguments over theft, while the scribe dipped bread in spicy sauce. Serious words. Silly hands, that's history. The loftiest thoughts, always scribbled down by people who forget their napkins. You finish the Karaite scroll just as the last candle begins to tremble. There's no official done in your workday, but the rhythm of the city tells you it's time to stop. The muezzin's call rises again. Somewhere, children are being called in. Women laugh softly behind closed shutters. A bowl clinks against stone. You seal the copied scroll with wax, just a small drop, marked with a line, not a symbol. The Karaites don't do flourishes. Then you tuck it into the to-deliver shelf. Tomorrow, it will go back to the Karaite quarter, and maybe, just maybe, they'll send you another, not because they like you, but because you're good. And sometimes, even in communities divided by theology, respect seeps in like water through stone. Your fingers ache. Ink stains bloom on the sides of your hand like bruises. But you feel oddly content, because today you copied a dramatic merchant letter, a Talmudic tractate full of loopholes and figs, a passive-aggressive Karaite shopping list, and the name of a donkey you'll never meet. You've touched 4 centuries and 5 lives, and you haven't even left your desk. You stand slowly, stretch, and whisper the blessing that closes your day. Blessed are you who grants wisdom. Even through the hands of a tired scribe. And as you blow out the last candle, you smile. Tomorrow, there will be more scrolls. More slings and onions and scribbled complaints. More Torah and laundry lists sharing the same parchment. And that, you think, is sacred. You rise early, not because you slept well, but because the sun bullied its way through the shutters before you had the chance to dream. Your back aches from yesterday's long copying session, and your fingers still bear faint lines of dried ink, like the shadows of forgotten vines. Outside, Cairo yawns into motion. Cartwheels clatter over stone, a boy shouts about hot bread, a rooster argues with a cat, and you, still groggy, wrap yourself in your writing shawl and light a thin wick for warmth more than light. This morning scroll waits on your desk like a guest you didn't invite but must now serve tea. It's not sealed. That means it's urgent. Or sacred. Or both. You unroll it slowly and find yourself staring at something rare, a letter not addressed to a person, but to a group. The Beit Din, the rabbinical court, these are always tricky. You must copy them precisely, even when they contain accusations, misquotations, or enough theological hairsplitting to make Maimonides cry. Today's letter comes from a man named Nissim ben Ezra, who opens not with pleasantries but with the Hebrew equivalent of listen, I'm only going to say this once. You squint. Nissim accuses the local water seller, a man named Caliph, of ritual impurity. Not for himself, mind you, but for his buckets. Apparently, Caliph has been using vessels that once carried oil for idol worship, or so Nissim claims, which would render every Jewish household that bought water from him spiritually compromised. You rub your eyes. Historians still debate whether claims like these were rooted in genuine halakhic concern or convenient economic sabotage. Either way, your job is not to judge, but to copy, so you begin, regarding the matter of Caliph, the water carrier, who was seen to. You stop mid-sentence. Did he say was seen or was said to have been seen? That one verb shift changes everything. Hebrew isn't always generous with its vowels, and this scroll is rushed, the letters leaning awkwardly left, like they're afraid of falling off the parchment. You make a note. Add both versions, separated by a tiny marginal question mark. Let someone else fight over which is kosher. You're just the messenger, after all, but oh, the power a messenger has. A knock at the door breaks your concentration. It's Yosef again, arms full of scrolls, balancing a tray of coffee like a nervous juggler. You nod him in, and he deposits both burdens with theatrical relief, one from the spice market, he mutters, and one from the women's prayer group. Don't ask. You raise an eyebrow. Did they send another recipe for insomnia with a side of midrash? He shrugs. Or possibly another marriage complaint disguised as a fundraiser. Classic, you thank him and return to Nissim's furious letter. It's grown more intense, now he's referencing Leviticus, citing the exact passage about contamination from vessels used for idol worship. There's a footnote. A literal footnote, he's drawn a tiny sandal and scribbled see commentary from Rav Sadia. You grin, some scribes decorate their work with doves and vines. Nissim prefers sarcastic footwear. The next scroll, the one from the spice market, is a revelation in contrast, it's a contract. Cleanly written. Beautifully sealed, a Jewish widow named Batya is leasing her late husband's spice stall to her cousin for 6 months, in exchange for a monthly share of profits and 3 bundles of cinnamon to be delivered on Rosh Chodesh. You admire the precision. Every measurement exact. Every term clear. There's even a clause about theft, if more than 2 sacks of cardamom go missing. The lease is void. You wonder what happened the last time Batya tried to lease this stall. There's also a phrase that tickles your curiosity, spice sharing according to the agreement made by the women of the blue canopy. You blink, the blue canopy, that's not a legal term. It's either a colloquialism, a forgotten market tradition, or the name of a group of women who made their own leasing rules in the absence of male scribes. Historians still argue about this one. Was it a guild, a ritual group, or a euphemism for something entirely domestic? Whatever the answer, you like it. It sounds like a bedtime story wrapped in legal parchment. Finally, you turn to the scroll from the women's prayer circle. It's longer than the others. Not in content, but in emotion. It begins with a prayer, shifts into a list of names, women who need healing, comfort, or a bit of rest, and ends with a note of thanks to the scribe who carries our names as if they were spices. You sit still for a moment, because in the quiet of your work, you sometimes forget, people aren't just trusting you with facts or funds. They're trusting you with their fears, their hopes, their mother's arthritis, their daughter's marriage, their own breathless prayers in the dark. You don't copy this scroll quickly, you take your time, spelling every name slowly. Some you know. Some you don't. One reminds you of your Aunt Rivka, who used to hum psalms while peeling carrots. You add a drop of your best ink for her name. No one will notice, probably, but she would have. The day slips past. You eat bread with oil, listen to an old man curse the heat from 2 windows down, and almost knock over your water jar while reaching for the cinnamon ink. Why does cinnamon ink exist? Because Batya asked for it, and Batya always gets her way. By evening, your fingers ache again. But your soul feels oddly light. You've copied arguments, prayers, insults, and commerce. You've brushed fingertips with theology and onion contracts and sandal-drawn sarcasm. You've connected households across Cairo who will never meet, but who now, thanks to you, share a single thread of ink, and in a quiet, absurd way, that feels like holiness. It's early evening in Fustat now, and your corner of the Geniza archive breathes its slow sigh of cooling air. The light shifts from a hot gold to soft amber, and you pause, forearms ink splattered, throat dry, eyes sandy, to consider what still needs doing. The shadows stretch longer than your to-do list, which is saying something. You haven't even opened the merchant's scroll yet. You stretch your back with a creak like an old wooden chest, and reach for the next bundle. This one smells faintly of cloves. Promising, unwrapping it carefully, you find a commercial ledger, a running list of debts and deliveries for a spice caravan out of Aden. It's written in Judeo-Arabic, with a few Hebrew headings here and there, and, oh joy, a line of what looks like goat grease smudging the lower margin. You don't even ask. The author of the ledger is a man named Ibrahim Ben Meir al-Bazari, a merchant whose handwriting is nearly illegible, though he underlines his totals with straight, confident strokes. That's something, at least. He also has a tendency to doodle fish in the corners of his parchment, which you decide to consider a personality trait rather than a problem. Today's entry opens with a shipment of nutmeg, 50 measures sent. 49 received, you smirk. That's the kind of discrepancy that launches entire rabbinical debates. It might have been a rat. It might have been theft. Or maybe someone just couldn't resist the scent of warm, woody rebellion and pocketed a handful on the way. Either way, you copy it all, the invoice, the delivery note, the tiny fish doodle nodding smugly in the corner. As you work, you're joined, uninvited, of course, by a neighborhood cat. She slinks in through the cracked shutter, tail flicking disdainfully, and leaps onto your workbench with the smug authority of someone who's never copied a line in her life and yet somehow thinks she owns the room. She sniffs the ink pot. Disapproves. Sits directly on a blank sheet of parchment. Naturally, you slide her gently to the side and return to the scroll. There's a second page now, recording a disagreement between two Jewish merchants, one from Cairo, one from Mahala, regarding a shipment of saffron. The Cairo merchant claims the saffron was measured improperly, citing the Mahala man's over-generous spooning technique. The Mahala man replies, via footnote, that his spoons are blessed by 3 rabbis and one very particular grandmother. You stifle a laugh. Your quill stutters. You manage to steady it before the cat swipes at your sleeve. Historians still debate whether these business exchanges were truly heated or more performative, ritualized sparring between men who knew each other too well. In many cases, the same men who fought in ink also dined together by candlelight hours later. In the world of trade, pride and paprika often walked hand in hand. You glance up from the scroll and see it's nearly time for Ma'ariv, the evening prayers. You won't make it to the synagogue tonight, but you whisper a psalm anyway, quietly, under your breath, more rhythm than meaning. A kind of punctuation mark between scrolls. You do this often. A lot of scribes do. It's less about obligation, more about rhythm. Something to mark the end of one task before the beginning of the next. The next scroll is a curiosity. It's not trade, not prayer, not law, it's a collection of jokes, or, to be more precise, a list of comedic riddles scrawled in the margin of what used to be a medical text. As if someone grew bored of fevers and bloodletting and decided to lighten things up with a bit of wordplay, you read one aloud. Why did the camel refuse the contract? Because it had too many humps in the claws. You groan out loud. The cat blinks slowly at you, unimpressed. The next one is worse. How do you get a rabbi to laugh? Promise him a break in the fast, then serve mustard. You chuckle in spite of yourself. Mustard again. It always comes back to mustard. The final riddle, smudged and fading. What do you call a dishonest scribe? You pause, squinting. It reads, a rewrite of the truth. You shake your head and grin. Somewhere in time, another scribe laughed at this. You've met your ancestor in wit. As darkness falls fully over the city, the sounds change again. The late vendors call out one last time. A baby cries in a nearby apartment. A wife scolds her husband for forgetting lentils. And someone, somewhere, begins to sing. It's a slow, sweet melody, half lullaby, half lament. You recognize the tune. Old Yemenite. Probably passed down through 3 mothers and 1 mischievous uncle. You pause your copying and just listen, because while ink holds the words, the songs carry the soul, and in this attic-turned-archive, surrounded by jokes and saffron ledgers and the echo of blessings whispered over spice racks, you're reminded of something essential. The Geniza isn't just a garbage pile of sacred scraps, it's a city, a paper city. A handwritten, marginalia crammed, sandal-stomped, cat-approved city that still breathes because people like you keep it warm with memory. You stretch again. The cat is asleep on your knee. There's still 1 scroll left for tonight, tucked under a jar of cloves, but it can wait a few more heartbeats. Let the tune finish first. You finally ease the scroll out from beneath the jar of cloves. Careful not to jostle the lid. Even in this cramped space, the scent is potent, sharp, spicy, comforting. You wonder if the merchant who sent this had any idea his packaging would outlive him by centuries. Sent intact, the scroll is bound tight with faded blue string. A sign, maybe, that it came from a woman. Blue dyes, even muted ones, were often used by female correspondents. There's no law about it, of course, but habits leave fingerprints. You loosen the knot, already curious, and just like that, you're holding a letter. It's addressed simply, to my sister, who knows the shape of my soul. Well, that's a beginning. The handwriting is elegant, firm, practiced, no scratchy hesitation. No heavy slant. This was written by someone educated, someone fluent in the form and art of written Hebrew. You recognize the tone immediately, dignified emotion. The kind of restraint that suggests something much deeper beneath the surface. You skim the first few lines. She writes of bread, of laundry, of her son's cough, and the endless back and forth with the grocer over the price of sesame oil, and then, tucked between the cumin and the coughs, comes the true heartbeat of the letter. I see him sometimes still, walking past the well. Ah! There it is. You sit back, you know this kind of letter. You've seen its sisters, its cousins, its granddaughters. They bloom like wildflowers in the Geniza, letters from women. Written in private moments, often never meant for public eyes. What survives isn't always the sharpest theology or the grandest merchant contract. Sometimes, it's love. Or the shadow of it. Historians still debate whether these letters were intentionally preserved or simply never delivered. Some argue that women tucked them away out of discretion, while others suggest they were hidden for safety, or forgotten altogether. Either way, you're the one reading them now. The letter continues. She describes a man, the scholar with the ink-stained sleeve and sandal strap that always comes loose, and you smile. That's very specific. Very remembered. They met during Torah readings. Exchanged books, and glances, and eventually small favors. She copied texts for him. He fixed a broken hinge on her writing box. He was not her husband. You run your fingers over the next lines gently. She speaks of longing, but always in metaphor, like hiding cinnamon in lentils, or swallowing words so they don't flavor the room. And finally, I lit a candle for him last week. Not for his health. Just for the light it made. The cat stirs. You shift the scroll aside, slowly, almost reverently. The Geniza isn't only about facts and fragments. It's about the lives that flickered behind them. You can see her, barefoot on a tiled floor, one hand on the windowsill, the other shading the candle's flame as it dances quietly in the Cairo night. You're no romantic, not really. But some letters force you to listen with your chest instead of just your eyes. You're drawn next to a curious find, a bundle of paper tucked inside a reused grain sack. It's marked with a crude drawing of a donkey, someone's idea of labeling. Inside, you find page after page of lists. At first, they seem mundane, inventories of kitchen goods, soap, candles, even broken spoons, but the handwriting is consistent. So is the structure. Each line is dated. And then you realize, it's a running log of household supplies kept by a female scribe, not a servant. Not a wife. She signs each page, almost defiantly, Devorah Bat Eli, keeper of words. You sit straighter. There's a long-standing debate over the role of women scribes in medieval Jewish Egypt. Some say it was limited to personal or domestic texts, things not meant for public or religious use. Others insist women took part in broader communal writing, even if only quietly, in back rooms or behind veils. Devorah clearly kept lists, yes. But in the margins of her entries are tiny notes, flourished Hebrew poems, even running jokes. Next to a broken oil lamp she writes, still gives more light than Moshe's opinions. You chuckle, this woman knew how to shade. You copy her work carefully. Not just the numbers, but the asides, the voice, the wit. Because what makes a document worthy of preservation isn't always its grandeur, it's the pulse of a person. Still whispering between the lines, as the moon rises, the shadows in your attic room sharpen. You're nearing the end of your shift, but you reach for one last piece, a document folded twice, its corners soft and curling. It's a ketubah, a Jewish marriage contract. But not like any you've seen before. This one is from a merchant couple in Fustat who decided, quite radically, to co-sign a clause. In the event of trade loss, both parties agree to equal contribution in restitution. That's bold. Most ketubot are formal, heavily prescribed. The man lists financial promises, the woman, her dowry. This one reads more like a business agreement, and a loving one. They refer to themselves as partners in all things. In market and in mercy. You copy the phrase twice. Once for the record. Once for yourself. There's something soothing about this contract. Two people, deciding to define their love not just with poetry or pomegranates, but with shared economic resilience. Romantic? Maybe. Pragmatic? Certainly. Very Ashkenazi, really. The candle flickers. Lower now. You lean back. You've read of secret loves and saffron disagreements. Of jokes hidden in medicine texts. Of women who dared write their names. Of marriages with balance sheets and blessings. This is what a day in the Geniza can look like. Not one grand scroll, but 100 quiet murmurs. Not kings or prophets, but people, muddled and mustard-stained and occasionally brilliant. You dip your quill one last time and write a tiny note to yourself in the margin of your own log, a good day. No spilled ink. One cat. You're halfway through your second fig when the cat darts under the desk and yowls at something invisible. Typical. You ignore him, more curious about the odd bundle of paper you just unwrapped. It's tied not with string, but with hair, human hair. Braided. Okay, now you're listening. There's an old superstition about using hair to bind sacred words. Some say it's protective. Others believe it curses the text so no one but the original owner can read it clearly. Either way, it's not something you see every day in a Geniza pile. You unwind the braid gently. The scroll crackles as it unfolds. It's thinner than usual parchment, Egyptian flax-based, perhaps, not animal hide. And the handwriting? Slanted. Compressed, full of abbreviations. Someone was writing fast. Or writing secretly. This, you realize quickly, is a list of banned books. Well. That escalated. The heading reads, Names to Avoid and Arguments to Silence. Beneath it is a long list of rabbinic figures, scribes, and works deemed dangerous, unorthodox, or just plain annoying. Each entry includes a brief description and, occasionally, a delightful editorial comment. Here's one: Yehuda of Alexandria speaks too much of angels, not enough of deaths. Harmless but exhausting. And another: Eliyahu the scribe believes the moon is a library. No. You stifle a laugh. Who writes a moon library off so quickly? Historians still debate whether such lists were official bans or simply community gossip dressed up as piety. Some rabbis used them to maintain intellectual boundaries, others used them to settle grudges. The truth is probably somewhere in between, like most of Jewish history, really, but this list is unusually long. And unusually specific. It even includes recipes, the so-called heretical grape tonic of Moshe b. Shmuel. Causes dreams. Avoid. You make a mental note, that one sounds worth trying. At the very bottom of the page, scrawled sideways in a different hand, is a curious line: we do not throw words away. Even the foolish ones. You pause, that may be the most Geniza thing you've read all week. Later that afternoon, you find yourself sorting through binding fragments, strips of cloth and parchment once used to tie or wrap religious texts. Usually unremarkable, until you find a strip with names written all along its edge. Tiny ones. Almost like a prayer list. You squint. These aren't biblical names. They're .local. You recognize the grocer, the midwife, even one of the beggars who sits by the spice shop on Thursdays. There's no heading, no context, just names. Carefully inked, each one spaced precisely. It's tempting to dismiss it as a scribe scratchpad. But you've seen something like this before. in a note folded into a baby's swaddling cloth last spring. Names, written to protect, to invoke blessing, or maybe to preserve memory, scholars still puzzle over these name lists. Were they mystical, medicinal, commemorative? Some argue they were early forms of communal registries, while others think they functioned more like amulets or charms. You don't know either. But you run your finger down the names slowly, like a soft roll call of the vanished, and then, at the end, one final name, me. Written without flourish. Just that, me. You blink, and the candle's glow wavers for a moment. You step outside to stretch your legs, blinking into the light of late afternoon. Fustat buzzes gently around you, donkey carts squeaking by. Children running with scraps of matzah, and someone shouting about eggplants in the distance. It smells like roasted garlic and the Nile in spring. You wander to the small market square, where old women sell ink by the ounce and linen scraps dyed to match the colors of the festivals. One of them recognizes you and hands you a folded parchment. No charge, she says. Found it in a drawer of onions. You open it. It's a joke. How many rabbis does it take to sharpen a quill? No punchline. Just the setup, and the word discuss. You smile and pocket it. The woman grins. That one came from a dyer's shop. You scholars always hide your best work behind vinegar. She's not wrong. Back in the attic, you pull out a narrow tube sealed with wax. This one was labeled in Judeo-Arabic, written in a child's hand, grandfather's dream, do not open unless it's very hot. Luckily, the attic qualifies. You crack the wax carefully. The scroll inside is delicate but legible, a dream journal. Not theological, not mystical. Just dreams, dates are listed. Then dreams. Some are bizarre. A fish with a beard explained the book of Daniel to me in Portuguese. Others are tender. I saw my wife before she died, baking fig bread. She smiled and told me the cat forgives me. And one is marked with an asterisk and the words, this one came true. You wonder what that means. There's no follow-up. No explanation. Historians rarely study dreams in the Geniza, they're too personal, too inconsistent. But these fragments are often the closest you get to a heartbeat. You tuck the scroll gently into your to-transcribe basket. You don't know this man. But tonight, maybe he'll visit your dreams too. Hopefully without the fish. The sun slants now through the slatted window, catching the golden shimmer of a Persian ink pot on your desk. You're down to the last two items in this morning's pile. One is a tax record. Exciting. The other is a recipe for ink written in rhyming verse. Take soot of olive, grind with care, add vinegar, but not too rare. Whisper blessing, stir it thrice, if it clumps, start over. Twice. It's silly. Or it's serious. You can't always tell in the Geniza, but it's beautiful. So you copy it too. By the time evening settles, the cat has curled into a parchment nest. Your fingers are stained with ink, saffron, possibly wine, and definitely cat hair. You've catalogued over 100 fragments. But more than that, you've been reminded, again, that the Cairo Geniza isn't a treasure chest. It's a conversation. A lived-in, unfinished, ink-blotted conversation between centuries. You don't just read it, you join it. You've barely closed your eyes when a breeze lifts the edge of a scroll and flicks it against your cheek. Not enough to hurt, just enough to whisper, you missed something. Typical Geniza. Even when you're trying to rest, it pokes you with unfinished sentences. You groan softly and sit up, brushing crumbs from your lap. It's the tax record again, that unassuming sheet you almost didn't bother with. But something catches your eye now, a small smudge at the bottom, half-erased ink pressed into a corner. You tilt it toward the candlelight, for the scribe's eye only. Well, now you're definitely reading it. It's a marginal note, written so lightly it seems ashamed of itself. The handwriting is the same as the rest of the document, but smaller. Slanted. Rushed. As if added just before folding the sheet. It says, adjusted entry for widow Rachel, she cannot pay. You blink, The main tax roll lists her as having paid 2 dinars, the note, however, says she gave none, and you suspect the scribe changed the record to protect her. To make her invisible to the authorities, that's not just editing. That's rebellion in lowercase. Historians still debate the role of scribes in tax systems. Were they impartial? Biased? Secret activists? There's no consensus. But moments like this suggest that under the strict hand of bureaucracy, there were fingers quietly curled in resistance. You whisper, "Good for you, whoever you were." And for a moment, it feels like that long-gone scribe nods back. The Geniza is full of scribes like that, men, and occasionally women, caught between paperwork and principle. One scroll from a century earlier even includes a short poem titled Ode to Avoiding Taxes, but gently. It's got 4 stanzas, and a heavy use of metaphors involving goats. You commit the final verse to memory: "Let the tallyman count shadows, not bread, we give what we can, then go where we're led. If your purse holds air, just walk like it's gold, smile sweetly, and never look cold." You chuckle. That's not poetry, that's a strategy. Late afternoon fades into the blue hush of evening, and you decide it's time for tea. There's a rusted kettle on the windowsill. Well, tea might be generous. More like leaves from something vaguely mint-adjacent floating in warm water. Still, the act is soothing. You pour a little into a cracked cup and sip slowly, eyes on the growing shadows outside. That's when you notice the ceiling, more precisely, the scrolls tucked into it, thin slivers of parchment carefully wedged between rafters, sealed in beeswax, and hidden from both light and mice. You've been up here for weeks and never once looked up. Typical. Always cataloging the bottom of things, never the top. You stand on a stool, reach up, and slide one free. It's fragile. Dusty. Smells like cloves and regret. You open it carefully. It's a love letter. Not a grand one. Not a sonnet or scroll of endless yearning. Just a brief, honest note, to the baker's daughter: "I am not a rabbi, not a merchant, only a poor scribe who likes your hands. They smell like yeast. When you smile, I forget Hebrew." You laugh quietly. There's no signature. Just a small, folded corner with the single word, "maybe." It's unclear whether the letter was ever sent, or simply written and hidden. Scholars still debate the emotional purpose of unsent letters. Were they prayers? Confessions? Drafts for courage that never arrived? You think this one was meant to be found. If not by the baker's daughter, then by someone like you. Someone who needed a reminder that even among theological debates and tax records, someone once forgot Hebrew over a loaf of bread. You climb down slowly and return to your desk, where a pile of half-sorted scraps waits. One of them is entirely blank, except for 2 words in the corner: "I'm here." That's it. No context. No clues. You stare at it for a long moment, and for some reason, you write back on the other side: "Me too." You fold the parchment and tuck it into your satchel. It's not official, but maybe it's enough. As the final rays of daylight melt into amber, you strike flint to light a fresh candle. The Geniza attic smells like heat, old ink, and paper dust now. Everything feels suspended: time, air, you. Your next fragment is small. Written in a precise hand, Arabic script with Hebrew glosses. It's a prescription for sadness that returns without cause. You pause. It suggests cardamom tea, gentle music, psalms read aloud with breath between verses, and, oddly, walking barefoot on cold tile. Not a bad plan, honestly. Historians have long overlooked Geniza medical fragments, but recent research has started paying attention. Some suggest these were copied from Muslim physicians. Others think they're entirely folk-based. No one agrees. You try to imagine someone, 900 years ago, slipping this note under a friend's door. No fanfare. Just quiet care. You tuck it aside in the folder labeled Soft Remedies. It's getting crowded. At the edge of your pile lies a rolled-up document sealed with a dried fig stem. You crack it open, and immediately recognize the handwriting. It's a known scribe, one you've followed for weeks now. His style is unmistakable: sharp letters, slightly slanted, always ending his yuds like a tail. He signs every page with a different flourish, as if each document is a new performance, but this page? It's not strange, it's a script. A play, a comedic scene between a tax collector and a rabbi who pretends to be deaf whenever asked for money. It includes stage directions, character names, and several jokes involving fish. You laugh out loud, so do the mice. You hadn't expected that. The play ends with the rabbi accidentally marrying the tax collector's daughter during a misunderstanding over the word shekel. You mark it for translation and whisper, Broadway missed out. Night settles in fully. Outside, the muezzin's call blends with the creak of palm branches and the low clink of dishes. Someone's still selling soup down the alley, lamb and garlic, maybe lentils. Your stomach growls, and even the cat lifts its head. You're hungry. Tired. But content, you gather your notes, blow out the extra candles, and whisper a prayer you don't quite remember learning. Then you look once more at that odd note, I'm here. And feel a little less alone. There's something different about tonight. Maybe it's the air, thicker, warmer, heavy with desert silence. Or maybe it's the way the candle sputters twice before settling, like it knows you're about to uncover something strange. Not strange like a misplaced grocery list on the back of a prayer scroll. Strange. Like, why is this written in 4 languages and also upside down? Kind of strange. You're back at the work table, nibbling on a date that's more pit than fruit, and leafing through what was supposed to be a batch of mundane market contracts. Olive oil, sacks of barley, goats being goats. The usual, until, there it is, a parchment fragment with no clear top or bottom. Hebrew script on one side, Judeo-Arabic on the other. Layered between both, faint Greek. And in red ink, Aramaic curses. So that kind of night, the Geniza wasn't just for religious texts and legal ephemera. It was a spiritual attic for the unwanted, the unreadable, and the unclassifiable. And this document? Well, this document practically hums. You turn it clockwise. Then again. The words form no obvious order, no sensible direction. But your eye catches something, repeated symbols. A triangle. An open palm. A fish without a tail, they're drawn small, like punctuation marks from a forgotten alphabet. Historians still debate what these symbols mean. Some say they were shorthand for scribal notes. Others claim they're remnants of mystical diagrams. A few argue, quietly, of course, that this is proto-Kabbalistic iconography, written before Kabbalah had a name. You wouldn't call yourself superstitious. But you're not noticing how quiet everything just got. You hold the page up to the candlelight. The parchment is thin, delicate enough that you can see the faint shadow of an older ink underneath. Someone had scraped off the original text and reused it, standard Geniza thrift. But what's underneath is, a chart? No, more like a calendar. Not of festivals or civic events, but dreams. 4th night of Tammuz, dream of clay falling from the sky equals poor harvest. 8th night, dream of teeth breaking equals ill omens for the father. 13th, dream of figs equals marriage, likely forced. You blink. A dream calendar. There are entire Babylonian Talmudic passages discussing dreams, sure. But this is different, part practical guide, part superstitious poetry, and part someone's anxious journal. You gently fold it and set it aside. Into a folder labeled, unsolvable. You'll be revisiting that one when you're older. Or bolder. Next, you pull a tiny scrap from the edge of the stack. It's not much, just 2 lines. But your heart actually skips. It's not a scribe's work, it's a child's handwriting. Jagged letters, all over the place. No margins, no respect for line width. And written in childish Judeo-Arabic, my mother says I may not eat figs before sundown. I do not like sundown. That's it, but it's everything. You imagine a curly-haired child sneaking into the Geniza room, perhaps their parent was a scribe, and scrawling this tiny rebellion on discarded parchment. Their first protest. Their first essay. Their figgy little manifesto. There's something deeply comforting about it. History, for all its wars and doctrines, still makes room for small, sweet complaints. You slide the scrap under your blotter. It's your new favorite, but then, just as your eyes begin to glaze, the last fragment of the night throws a soft punch to the gut. It's a letter, from a Jewish woman named Maisel, addressed to a friend in Tyre. The ink is faded. The corners torn, but the words remain, "Do not forget me." If your ship arrives before the barley harvest, send word with the fisherman's boy. I dreamt of you 3 nights in a row. In each, you were wearing the blue cloak I gave you, and you were sad. Please, don't be sad. The sun still finds us. You read it 3 times, the handwriting is neat, practiced. Educated. Loving, you wonder if the friend in Tyre ever read it. If the fisherman's boy ever delivered it. If the blue cloak ever faded. Historians still argue whether the Geniza's thousands of letters reflect personal emotional lives or stylized formulaic writing. But you're sitting here, tears threatening the edges of your vision, and you have an opinion. They meant it. Some nights, the Geniza whispers to you. Other nights, it sings. But tonight, it's weeping, not in sadness, just in memory. In pressure held too long. In the ache of names written down so they wouldn't disappear. In dreams catalogued and figs denied and unsent goodbyes, you sit back, rub your eyes, and exhale. The cat stirs, the candle flickers, you write in your logbook, not a summary, but a simple line, "Tonight, ghosts with soft voices." It's too late for tea. Even the mice seem drowsy now. You gather the day's finds into neat piles, tied with twine and tagged with date and category. And then, almost out of nowhere, you start to laugh, because the child with the fig complaint, they tried to draw a figure, it looks like a lemon with legs, you write next to it, "Excellent figure." Then you roll up your mat, stretch your back, and lie down on a thin cushion beneath the window. The stars are faint, but they're still there, just like Maisel said. You wake slowly, the sound of Cairo stirring before the light fully returns to the sky. Somewhere down in the alley, a metal shutter clangs shut. A peddler is already shouting the virtues of his chickpeas, which, you suspect, are the same slightly suspect chickpeas as yesterday, but that's not your concern this morning. You stretch, wince at the stiffness in your spine. Geniza mats are not known for orthopedic design, and reach for the small leather-bound ledger you keep beneath your head. Today is a documentation day. And those are not the quiet, contemplative days of solitary reading. No, today you'll play host, diplomat, scribe, and detective. You're not alone in this Geniza story. Because there are other scribes in this city. And some of them aren't thrilled by the fact that you've been reorganizing their categories. Let's be clear. Cairo's scribal network is both a professional guild and an amateur debate club. You've got the perfectionists who file everything under 15 subheadings. And the anarchists who just toss it all in labeled letters, miscellaneous, etc., who knows. And then there's you, the dangerous middle. You believe in categories, but flexible ones. You like things orderly, but you also love finding connections across the gaps. A wedding contract might share marginalia with a tax dispute. A mystical spell might quote the same proverb as a lost bakery ledger. And those links? Those are gold, the other scribes. They think you're messy, they haven't seen your wall. Ah yes. The wall, one whole side of your Geniza workspace, is covered in pinned scraps. Not nailed, too damaging, not pasted, blasphemous, but delicately hung with fishbone needles on string lines. It's your constellation map of forgotten voices. You call it the breathing wall. It features the 3 letters you suspect were part of a failed elopement, a poem written by a blind merchant, who rhymed copper coins with God disappoints, a receipt signed by a woman using only a thumbprint, but sealed with a wax imprint of what might be a pomegranate, and your current obsession, 3 letters. All written on the same date, by 3 different authors, who reference the same unnamed debtor. Historians still argue whether these juxtapositions reveal actual social networks or are just random chance. But you've got a theory. The Geniza doesn't store fragments. It stores conversations, as you prep your scrolls and clean your reed pens, the door creaks open. It's Yehuda, again. You brace. Yehuda is one of the more senior scribes, older, grumpier, more ink on his robe than in his inkwell. He's brought a stack of documents for formal cataloging. But before he hands them over, he delivers a monologue on the sanctity of genre integrity. Legal scrolls do not belong with mystical dreams. He mutters, "Tell that to the man who wrote his will on the back of a prayer for rain." You reply. He snorts, but he hands you the bundle. You two don't agree. But you trust each other's eyes. The next few hours are a blur of dry fingers, ink-stained thumbs, and careful transcription. You work through faded divorce contracts, suspiciously generous dowries, and the occasional birth announcement that begins, to our enormous surprise, by midday, your back is aching again. You pause to boil tea over a small brazier, using the last pinch of mint from your secret stash. The Geniza doesn't allow food or drink officially, but you're not chewing scrolls, so you feel justified. Sipping slowly, you spot a loose corner of parchment sticking out from beneath a broken box labeled Sale Records, Do Not Disturb. You, of course, disturb it. Inside is something truly odd, a folded square of parchment, stitched at the edges with what looks like cat hair. You open it carefully, breaking the stitch with your fingernail. Inside, a tiny garment. A doll's robe. Hand-sewn, poorly, tucked beside it, a note in barely literate Hebrew, "She is still mine. Do not bury her yet." Goosebumps rise. Was this morning madness? Magic? Historians still debate the meaning of such finds. Were they ritualistic? Merely personal? Or evidence of folk beliefs far outside the rabbinic mainstream? You hold the tiny robe like it might dissolve. You put it on the breathing wall, mid-afternoon. Time to update the registry scroll. It's a long document, one that lists every known category of Geniza material, its estimated volume, its most frequent authors, languages, and script forms. There's a whole column just for complaints from Yehuda, but today you add something new, Category 27b, Unresolved Echoes. You list, the stitched robe and note, a series of 3 empty pages with only one Hebrew word in the center, don't, a merchant ledger with every woman's name mysteriously redacted, and the fig protesting child, now promoted to mascot. Evening creeps in. A pigeon lands in the window grate and eyes you like you owe it rent. You think back to a time you misfiled an entire scroll because you thought the word Leviathan, meant market tax. Easy mistake. You ended up placing a commentary on sea monsters next to local fishing permits. But strangely, they had the same margin doodles. Coincidence, or divine cataloging humor? You decide not to correct it. It's funnier that way. As the last light slants across your breathing wall, you pin up one more scrap. It's fresh from today, a piece of parchment with a child's multiplication table on it. Sloppy, sure. But near the bottom, someone added, he learns slowly. But his voice is like honey. You smile, you write next to it, student, anonymous, but beloved. Then you sit. You don't write. You don't file. You just sit. The Geniza breathes, and you breathe with it. You wake to an unexpected silence. No peddlers, no squawking birds, not even Yehuda grumbling in the hallway. Cairo, for once, holds its breath. You rise slowly, rubbing your temples, a dull ache forming behind your eyes, the kind that only scribes and bakers truly understand. The Geniza is darker than usual. Dust hangs in the still air like secrets unsaid. You light a small oil lamp, its flame wavering like a guilty conscience. Today is inventory day. The term sends a cold draft up your spine. Not because you fear the task, but because it means opening drawers that haven't seen daylight in decades. Sometimes, literally. You have a splinter in your finger from last year's inventory that still flares up in cold weather. Inventory day also means reckoning with the forgotten, the misplaced. The stories that slip through even your fingers. You start at the bottom, because the bottom drawers are the oldest. They smell of wax and parchment and something sweetly rotten. A mix of cinnamon, myrrh, and mildew. Drawer 1, Family Letters. These are the easiest. Sentimental, messy, usually ending in apologies or forgotten debts. You find a bundle tied with red string. A merchant writing weekly to his wife across the Nile. In the final note, he mentions she's stopped replying. He asks if the pigeon is sick. Drawer 2, medical charms. Mostly ink-blotted slips of Aramaic scrawled in panic. One features a drawing of a goat next to the Hebrew words pain gone now. Another is stitched inside a tiny pouch of linen, with fennel seeds still rattling inside. You sneeze. Allergic to history, you joke. Historians still argue whether such amulets should be considered part of religious literature or magical practice. You personally file them under very human behavior. But drawer 3 is the trickster. It was labeled commercial records, OLD City. But over the years it became a dumping ground for things that didn't fit elsewhere. A scribal junk drawer. You call it the jumble. You pull it open, it smells like cloves and panic. Here are some of its greatest hits: a marriage contract rewritten 3 times, all with different dowry amounts, a poem that begins in Hebrew, switches to Arabic, and ends in Ladino, with no explanation, a child's drawing of what you think is a lion attacking a market stall, labeled a real event, maybe, a tax receipt signed by someone named simply Baruch the Tall, with no further identification, and then, near the bottom, you find something you've never seen before. It's a scroll. Short, tightly wound, sealed with old blue wax. No label. No date. You hesitate. Even your fingers feel cautious. You break the seal, the parchment unfolds slowly, like it resents being disturbed. What you find is a confession, or something like it. The scroll begins, "To the one who will read this, whenever that may be." It goes on to describe, in painfully elegant Hebrew, a scribe who deliberately hid certain documents. He believed some stories deserved to be lost, that to preserve everything was to make nothing sacred. He names no names. Gives no details. Only intentions. "I withheld them not to deceive," he writes, "but to protect them from curiosity that knows no reverence." You pause. Is this heresy, or just a scribe who saw the Geniza as a garden, not a landfill? Historians still debate whether scribes ever destroyed documents secretly, or if the Geniza's sheer chaos simply swallowed them. You suspect a little of both. And now you have proof, but you don't file the scroll, not yet. You sit with it in your lap. Your oil lamp flickers, you look at the breathing wall. At all the lives strung up in bits and tatters, and then you ask yourself, are there stories we're better off not knowing? You decide to write your own note. You take a scrap from your left sleeve pocket, the one you use for spontaneous thoughts or jokes too terrible to say out loud. On it, you write, "Today I met another scribe across time. He's wrong. But I understand." You fold the note and tuck it behind the confession. You place them both inside an unlabeled box. You push the drawer shut, and you don't tell anyone. Inventory continues. You find a spelling contest between 2 students that ends with both claiming truth has no vowels, a shipping list for a synagogue kitchen that includes 32 onions, 2 goats, and 1 professional liar. This is crossed out, but you snort anyway, a romantic poem written on the back of a legal dispute. Possibly by the same person. You are tired now. More tired than usual. But it's not the kind of tired that sleep cures, it's the tired of knowing that even sacred memory is messy. That even in the act of preserving, you shape. You filter. You choose, and sometimes, you bury, not just with earth, but with silence. You close the last drawer. You blow out the lamp, and in the darkness of the Geniza, you whisper one line from a prayer you once copied so many times it etched itself into your muscle memory: "Who writes the book of life, in ink or dust?" And then, because you're still you, you add, hopefully with better handwriting than Yehuda. Morning sunlight slices through the mashrabiyah shutters, casting tiny squares of gold across your pillow. But the Geniza isn't calling you today. Not yet. Today, you have an errand, one you've been putting off for weeks. The Karaite librarian across the quarter has summoned you to review a small trove of texts mistakenly attributed to Rabbinite scholars. The subtext is clear: come fetch your heresies. Friend. You sigh and stretch, half grinning. Time to brave the most awkward tea in Cairo. You dress with extra care, modest but presentable. A small inkwell still stains your sleeve, you try to rub it off, then give up. Proof of honest work, you mutter, which you know is just what lazy people say about their stains. The streets are unusually quiet this morning. A spice vendor is arguing with a cat. The cat is winning. You pass the well and toss in a silent prayer that today's meeting involves fewer curses than the last one. The Karaite library is tidy, suspiciously so. Scrolls shelved at strict angles. Sandalwood in the air. A small placard at the entrance reads, "Truth without Mishnah." You smile despite yourself. That joke's been on the wall for 20 years, and it still draws blood. Inside, Rahel the librarian is waiting. She's younger than you expected. Unblinking. Ink-stained, too, though hers looks accidental. You exchange polite nods. No handshakes. The last time a rabbinite tried that here, they were gently but firmly handed a broom. She leads you to a narrow reading desk stacked with texts, some familiar, some you'd swear were copied by your own great-uncle. She opens the top scroll. You claim this is rabbinite, she says. No, you reply, gently. I claim it's not Karaite. She doesn't smile. But her eyebrow twitches, and in this room, that's a standing ovation. You begin reading the scroll aloud, rhythmically, the way you used to lull Yehuda's twin nieces to sleep. The handwriting is old. 12th century, maybe earlier. And fast. That's the word that comes to mind. Letters like galloping goats. You trace the text, a long meditation on Deuteronomy 17 verse 11, the infamous verse that Rabbanites often cite as authority for rabbinic law. Rahel watches, silent. You finish. Look up, it's rabbinic, you say. But it was copied by a Karaite. She tilts her head. How can you tell? You point. The scribe avoids invoking the oral law directly, but preserves rabbinic logic. See this marginal note? As the elders said, if they were wise. That's Karaite shade. Not rabbinite respect. She takes the scroll, studies the mark. Nods once. Historians still argue whether such marginalia were coded jabs or scribal accidents. You personally believe sarcasm leaves fingerprints. Rahel clears her throat. There's more. She brings out a bound set of papers, threaded with green linen. This is rare. Most Geniza texts come loose, orphaned. A bound collection implies intention, possibly secrecy. You untie the linen. Inside, debates. Dozens. On purity laws, calendar reform, marriage rights. Some labeled private. Others just signed, M. You stare at the handwriting, it's familiar. Very. You flip ahead. Yes, there it is. That strange half-aleph your teacher used to make. Like an aleph caught midyan. This was written by your teacher's teacher. The one who once translated an entire Aramaic tractate into bad poetry for a dare. This is rabbinite. But kind. Rahel lifts an eyebrow. You hand her one folio. He's arguing for Karaite recognition of divorce proceedings, provided the husband is present and not dead. That's oddly collaborative. She scans it. He also calls our interpretation beautiful, but wrong. Well, that's practically a hug coming from him. The morning turns into afternoon. You sip date tea. She drinks something herbal and ominous. You debate the calendar, again. This is the 4th time this year. You suggest a compromise, 2 calendars. And whoever makes the best lentil stew gets to decide next year's Passover date. She almost laughs. You ask to copy 2 pages from the green-bound collection. She agrees, on one condition: you show me your Geniza sometime. You hesitate. That's like inviting a rival rabbi into your dreams. It's messy, you say. So's my tea, she replies. But it still works. You leave with the pages tucked under your arm. As you step into the bright afternoon, you feel oddly lighter. You think of all the scribes who wrote only for people they'd never meet. Who argued on parchment instead of in person. Who left space in the margins for voices they couldn't imagine agreeing with. There's something sacred in that, you think, even if the tea was terrible. Back home, Yehuda's waiting. You smell like sandalwood and smugness, he says. You toss him the green-bound pages. He schemes one and snorts. This guy calls Karaites noble dissenters, see? You say. Progress. He sits, chewing the edge of his reed pen thoughtfully. You're meeting with them more often. I like her margins. He blinks. That better not be a metaphor. You grin. Later that night, you file the green folios in the Geniza, but you make a copy for your own drawer. One labeled, Proof that Arguments Can Be Friendly. You fall asleep wondering what future scribes will make of this day. Will they argue over your handwriting, debate your jokes, marvel that Rabbanites and Karaites shared tea? Probably not. They'll probably just ask why the page numbers skip from 47 to 49. You smile in the dark. Some mysteries are worth keeping. The sun is barely rising, but you're already on your knees in the Geniza, searching for something you're not even sure exists. Your fingers move over brittle parchment and parchment-like paper, lifting, sorting, breathing the past in through your nose. Dust, ink, olive oil. A scent cocktail only scribes can love. Today's obsession, finding a page missing from a responsum written by Rabbi Sharira Jayan nearly 200 years ago, one that references an obscure community dispute involving moon sightings, a goat, and someone named Fat Yosef. Yes, really. Fat Yosef, you pause and tilt your head. The last letter you found from this collection ends abruptly. And thus, I told them that any further appeal. Then nothing. No follow-up. No final ruling. Just a crumb of suspense left dangling like a dropped string of pearls. Historians still debate whether this missing page was simply lost or whether it was intentionally removed, maybe even censored. But in your bones, you feel it's here. Somewhere, so you begin again, 3 boxes deep into the far back corner, known affectionately as the pit of spiders and regrets. You find it, a slip of parchment folded twice. One corner chewed. Possibly by a rat. Possibly by a very determined argument. You carefully open it, and thus, I told them that any further appeal must be submitted only if the goat in question is not shared property. You sit back, stunned. The lost page. Concerns joint goat ownership. You bark out a laugh that echoes against the cracked stone walls. Somewhere, Yehuda yells, "Are you okay?" You shout back, legally, yes. You read further. The ruling is dry but brilliant, classic Jayan, nuanced, wry, and razor-sharp. Apparently, 2 households jointly owned a goat used for new moon sacrifices. One family saw the moon early, the other late. A fight broke out over whether to declare the new month together or separately. The goat, poor thing, was caught in the middle. Rabbi Sharira declared, if the goat is jointly owned, the ritual must wait for agreement. No agreement. No goat. No moon. You can't stop grinning. You rush upstairs, practically bouncing. Yehuda, sipping watered-down wine, raises an eyebrow. Let me guess. Moon goat? You nod. Confirmed. He leans back. We live in a world where someone archived goat law but threw out their marriage contract. You hold up the parchment. This is why I scribe. People forget. Parchment remembers. That afternoon, a young scholar from Alexandria visits the Geniza, eager and anxious. You recognize the type, pen still sharp, soul still idealistic. He carries a reed case and a scroll pouch and introduces himself as Isaac. No last name. Just Isaac, like a child expecting to grow into his surname later. I'm looking for a particular letter. He says, on the calendar dispute between Babylonia and Palestine. You suppress a smirk. Narrow it down. He frowns. It mentions a certain rabbinite leader. Perhaps in Fustat. Involved in delaying Rosh Hashanah due to a cloudy sky. Ah. That one. You dig through your private stash, the folder labeled Clouds Clergy, and produce it. Isaac reads it, trembling slightly. I never thought I'd see this. Not many have. He asks permission to copy it. You nod, but he doesn't just copy, he pauses, weighs words, asks you, do you think this delay was truly about clouds? You grin. Or politics? Or humility? You shrug. Historians still debate. He sighs. I'm going to quote that someday. You better, you say. It's a solid hedge. Later that day, you return to the moon goat parchment. You decide to recopy it, clean, without the rat bite. This time, you add a marginal note, let no community quarrel over a goat unless the goat volunteers, it's a joke. Maybe. You write it in tiny script, tucked in the lower right corner, hidden from lazy readers. You wonder, will someone centuries from now find this note? Will they squint, puzzled? Will they wonder whether it's a code? Or sarcasm? Or prophecy? That thought makes you giddy. The idea that your ink may one day confuse a scholar brings a special kind of joy, as the evening sun turns the Geniza gold. Yehuda leans against the archway, arms crossed. You've been recopying goat law for an hour. Because future generations deserve legal clarity regarding livestock. Remind me again, he says, how you're not the crazy one in this building. You wave him off. Go light the lamps. I need 2 more pages before dark. He lights them. Grudgingly. But he lights them, you keep copying, the flicker of candlelight turns your ink to amber, night comes quickly in Cairo, you close your folios, set them in the protected drawer, and breathe in the scent of ink drying. The Geniza rests, you whisper a blessing, half to yourself, half to the ghosts whose words you carry, may your arguments outlast your names. By the time you stumble into the courtyard the next morning, your back aches from last night's hunching and your thumb is still ink-stained from that cursed moon goat ruling. The pigeons, as usual, have no respect for scholarship and have turned the lintel over the Geniza door into a personal toilet. A holy one, perhaps. Yehuda is already there, muttering at a papyrus scroll that refuses to unroll evenly. Morning, he says without looking up. You look like parchment. You grunt in agreement and lower yourself onto the worn stone bench. The plan today? To track the changes in handwriting styles across 3 generations of scribes working on the same family's legal documents. Because why make things easy? Your first scroll is from around 1042. It's a will, meticulously inked, signed by a certain Baruch ben Meir, who apparently had a flair for dramatics. His opening line reads, "If I die today, know that it was probably because of my cousin's cooking." You chuckle. Humor in a will, very on brand for this family, then you compare it to another document, same family, 40 years later. A property dispute over a rooftop pigeon coop. And yes, it is the same rooftop you're sitting under now. This document is written in a completely different hand, larger loops, more spacing, a slight leftward slant. The scribe strokes tremble ever so slightly. You'd guess arthritis or maybe an aging hand trying to mask a tremor. Notice this? You murmur, holding the page up for Yehuda, who ambles over with mild curiosity, old man scribe. Exactly. And look, he switches script halfway through. From square to cursive Hebrew midline. Yehuda squints. Maybe someone took over the pen. Or he spilled ink and panicked. Or, you say, he just got tired. Like I will in 10 minutes. The Geniza is a peculiar archive. It's not organized the way modern libraries would prefer. Instead of neat categories, documents lie side by chance, recipes next to religious disputes, birth announcements tucked inside business contracts, poetry scribbled in margins of legal codes. Today, while searching for merchant letters, you stumble upon a wedding poem. Short. Rhyming. Surprisingly romantic, may your lamp never flicker, may your wine never spoil, may your mother-in-law be merciful, and your dowry light as oil. You laugh. Genuinely. The poet's signature is only two initials, ZL. Historians still debate who ZL might be. A known poet? A merchant with a hidden talent? Yehuda once theorized it was a woman, which caused a mild scandal among your circle, less because of misogyny, more because no one wanted to rewrite 3 footnotes. Still, whoever they were, ZL had a sense of humor and a steady hand. You quietly recopy the poem into your personal folio, a practice that's not quite stealing. But not entirely innocent either. You're hoarding poems again. Yehuda calls from across the courtyard, archiving, you correct. For morale. Next, you'll be writing your own. You don't respond. But later, you do scribble something under your breath. I know a girl from Fustat town, her curls are wild, her frown renowned, she'll steal your books and read them twice, then tell you gently, they weren't precise. Okay. Maybe you are becoming one of those scribes. In the afternoon, a strange man visits the Geniza. Tall, draped in merchant's robes, with rings on every other finger and a gold tooth that catches the sun. He introduces himself as Reuven, from Cairo. I was told you collect dreams. You blink. Excuse me. Dream interpretations, he clarifies. My uncle swore he sent one here. A dream about lions. You exchange a glance with Yehuda. He just shrugs. Section D, Wild Animals Omens. It's not an official section, but somehow you know exactly where to look. 10 minutes later, you're holding a dream report that reads, I saw 3 lions in my father's house, seated around a table eating figs. I was not afraid. My grandmother sang while balancing a spoon on her nose. The note ends with the interpretation, this means a wedding is near, and someone will forget the cinnamon. You hand it to Reuven, he reads it in silence. Nods solemnly, and slips you a coin, for preservation, he says. The dream came true. You pocket the coin and say nothing. But you'll remember this. Not because of the lions, but because of the spoon. That evening, you organize your folios, labeling each one with gentle care. In the process, you find something curious wedged between 2 unrelated pages, a tiny square of parchment bearing only 4 words, he forgot the cinnamon. No date. No context, just that, you stare at it, amazed, coincidence. You ask aloud, Yehuda smirks. Or the Geniza just knows everything before we do. You tuck it into your dream folder, some mysteries are better left unresolved. You start your morning half buried in a pile of Geniza fragments, each more confusing than the last. Someone, decades ago, stuffed an entire ledger into a grain sack, tore the pages apart, and used the scraps to wrap, cinnamon sticks, yes. You find a fragment crusted with what smells like sweet spice. This is not unusual. The Geniza holds many things, broken contracts, unfinished poems, spice-stained blessings, wine-ringed calendars, and a tax receipt signed with a thumbprint and the words, I had no quill, today's focus is an account book. Or half of one. You think, you lay the parchment out flat and begin the slow work of decoding its contents. Page 1, 7 baskets lent to Rav Daniel. Page 2, returned 5, 2 broken, 3 chickens dead. Wait, what? The logic is familiar, if you squint hard enough. These aren't just numbers. They're relationships. Favors. Promises. Gossip coded into coin columns. Historians still argue whether these kinds of ledgers reflect formal economic systems or informal communal loans. Either way, you're holding someone's very messy to-do list. 1 chicken short of an explanation, you keep going. Later, in the Geniza's west corner, you find a curious scrap, Hebrew script, but rhythmic. Not a prayer. Not a contract. You begin to whisper it aloud, and Yehuda, half asleep in the sunbeam nearby, stirs. What is that? Feels like a lullaby. You read it again, slower this time. If the world should crack at dawn, take the broom, sweep the stars, say the name you dare not speak, and sleep again behind old jars. He sits up. That's not in any prayer book I know. No, you whisper. But it's good. The parchment bears no author, only the faint outline of a child's palm, ink smudged, printed there on purpose. You wonder if this was part of some bedtime ritual. A scribe, maybe, wrote it for a daughter scared of thunder. Or for himself. Not all lullabies are for children. You gently place it in your personal curiosities folder. Yehuda calls that one your treasure chest of irrelevance. He's not wrong. But he's not right either. Around midday, you get a visitor, a young woman named Miriam, with ink-stained fingers and a leather pouch strapped across her chest. She's nervous. The Geniza does that to people. I'm looking for women's writings, she says. Anything not by men, if that's possible. You gesture to the large trunk on your left. Marriage contracts, dowries, letters between sisters, curses written on laundry receipts. Take your pick. She dives in. An hour later, she gasps. This one. Look. You lean over. It's a letter, delicate handwriting, addressed to a woman named Shava. It reads, "Do not cry when he yells. Cry when he forgets your birthday. One can be forgiven. The other is a slow erasure. No signature. But it's clearly written from one woman to another. Probably a friend. Or a sister. Maybe both." Miriam sits back. They said women didn't write. But they did. They just didn't sign. You nod. Some signed in invisible ink. Others let the paper speak. You leave her with a box labeled miscellaneous female, which really should be renamed proof of everything. The sun leans low across the Geniza's arches. You decide to wrap up with a favorite ritual, the restoration of a forgotten fragment. Today's subject, a personal prayer, found years ago inside a spice drawer. It begins mid-sentence, like all good secrets do, "And if I am unworthy. May my ink still be clear, may my quill not split mid-word, may my sighs not smudge the final line." You recopy it slowly, savoring every syllable. What makes a prayer private? The handwriting is careful. Someone meant for this to last, but they folded it, tucked it away with cinnamon sticks, and left it to be forgotten. Maybe they meant to forget it. You draw a border around the page. Add a tiny illustration of a feather at the top. And underneath, just for yourself, you scribble, "Prayer to the ink god of patience." Yehuda peers over. Did we make that up? Maybe, you murmur. But it works. As you're closing shop, one last visitor arrives, an older man, veiled in travel dust and wearing a scholar's ring. He speaks softly, "I seek a blessing." You frown. This isn't a synagogue. I know, he says. But paper holds blessings too. You nod slowly and hand him a thin page, something simple. A quote from the Psalms, copied long ago in cramped, hopeful letters. He reads it. Smiles. Tucks it away. Then, he says something that stays with you for years. You're not just a scribe. You're a memory keeper. And just like that, he's gone. You sit in silence for a long while, thinking about that. The Geniza breathes around you. Dust settles, ink dries, your fingers, tired and smudged, close the last folio of the day, and somewhere in the back of your mind, you hear the faintest whisper. Say the name you dare not speak. You smile. Tomorrow, you'll return, you always do. Your final day in the Geniza for this lunar month begins, as always, with soft footsteps, the clink of the iron key, and the way the door groans like it's waking up too. The sun is barely rising over Fustat, but already the room is thick with heat and secrets. You light a small lamp, unnecessarily dramatic, maybe, but the effect is worth it. The shadows retreat, and the day begins. Today, you've made a decision. You're going to finish restoring what Yehuda calls the loneliest document in Cairo. It's a single sheet, water-stained, mouse-bitten, and nearly unreadable. Someone, probably in the 12th century, tried to write a will, or maybe a confession, or maybe just their grocery list. It's hard to tell. Most of it is gone. But one line remains, faint and stubborn: "Let no man take from my house what was given in kindness." That's it, no name. No signature. Just a command and a plea rolled into one. You copy it out, line by line, with slow reverence. It's not about the content. It's about the voice. Whoever wrote this wanted to be remembered as someone who gave freely, and didn't want the world to mistake generosity for weakness. You're not sure if it was ever legally binding. Historians still debate whether scraps like this were drafts or emotional venting, unfinished declarations or finished but private ones. You lean toward the latter. Some things are meant to be read only once. Later, you return to your ongoing mystery, the woman with 17 aliases. You've been tracking her for weeks now, across divorce documents, shipping receipts, coded recipes, and one fiery letter in Judeo-Arabic that opens with "You may burn this after reading, or I will." She's smart. Sharp. Dangerous, maybe. Or just exhausted. Her names shift: Chana, Hannah, Anna, then back again. Was she evading taxes? Her husband? Her family? You don't know, but you admire her. You find her name, well, a name, again today. Scribbled in the corner of a laundry list for the widow's fund. You whisper it out loud. Chana. Yehuda appears beside you, carrying a tea glass that's too hot to drink. Still chasing your shadow woman? She's not a shadow, you murmur. She's a smudge with intent. He laughs. Aren't we all? As the afternoon drifts in, so does the muezzin's call from a nearby minaret. It blends, as always, with the chants of schoolboys practicing psalms on the next street over. Your pen glides more slowly now. The Geniza has quieted. You take this time to sort through your unshelved pile, the fragments that defy labels, a hand-drawn map of a bakery route, a joke, written in Aramaic, comparing Pharaoh to stale fish, a poem, signed Abraham, age 9. You don't have the heart to discard any of them, so you begin what you call your invisible index. A secret archive within the archive. You categorize these not by subject, but by feeling, fragments that sound like longing. Pages that smell like rosewater. Letters that look like arguments but end in love. This is not standard archival practice. But it works for you. You're not just a scribe anymore, you're a listener, a translator of ghosts. Evening leans in slowly. The lamplight gets warmer. The ink, softer. You pause your copying to run your fingers across the margin of a letter, thin red lines drawn by someone long gone. You imagine the steady hand that ruled them. Margins matter. That's where the real writing begins. You smile and glance at your own margins. One bears a doodle, a cat chasing a scroll. Another, a note to yourself: check if Zohar is left-handed. You'll never remember what that means, but you leave it there. It's honest. As the Geniza's day ends, you and Yehuda stack your finished folios. He hums a melody from his grandfather, something half lost, probably never written down. You both sit a while, just breathing. He finally says, "So, what will they remember us for?" You shrug. That depends. Do we get forgotten completely, or misquoted often? He laughs. Misquote me well, that's all I ask. The Geniza hums behind you. Not with noise, but with presence. A breath in parchment, before you close the door. You turn to take one last look. 1,000 voices, inked and anonymous, sleeping under your fingertips. You whisper, not to Yehuda, not to yourself, but to the room, "Thank you." Then you step outside, into the soft Cairo night, where the real world begins again. And now, dear traveler, as the last lamp flickers and the dust finally settles, you let the day's parchment fade from your fingertips. Outside, Cairo is quiet. The markets sleep. The donkeys have stopped complaining. The river hums like a lullaby just under the earth. You sit on the edge of your woven cot and think of all you've touched today, words from 1,000 years ago, names no longer spoken, promises that time itself folded away. There's something beautiful in the idea that none of it was wasted. That even forgotten grocery lists and scratched-out prayers meant something. You imagine someone, maybe centuries from now, sifting through your notes, your margin scribbles, your careful archiving of irrelevant curiosities. Maybe they'll wonder who you were. Maybe they won't, but still, your fingers shaped history in their own small way, and that's enough. Now, your breath slows. Your eyes feel heavy. You think of the woman who signed 17 names, of the lullaby with no composer, of the ink god of patience. You smile, the world narrows into stillness, a soft, warm sleep creeps in like a quiet page turning. Let it. Good night.